Okay, Leanne, today is another episode of 10 and 2, and today our title is
How to Fight Fair.
This is 10 and 2. My name is Mark.
I'm Leanne, and we are navigating life with 10 children.
10 children. We're taking you on a journey, the highs and lows, talking about from a biblical perspective, and we hope you follow along. Okay, well, here we are in another episode, Leanne. We are doing another late night recording.
It's how it fits in our life.
Leanne promised me she's going to bring the energy, like she's going to bring the riz like no other.
I don't even know what that means.
That was for my kids. They're going to hate that.
They don't watch our podcast.
They don't watch our podcast. You're right. But here's the deal. Today, we have a topic that I think is important to talk about because everyone gets into a fight. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Argument, yep. Disagreements.
Yes.
They're all fights.
Yeah. Like, just even like disagreements. That's a good one. Like that is part of a healthy lifestyle, I think, in marriage, in relationships, because we are, as human beings, are going to have disagreements. Conflict, right. So let me just say, early on in our dating history, Leanne and I remember, growing up, and I was a very outspoken, very outgoing person.
No, not you.
Yes, I was. I really
Wow.
was. And one of the things I remember specifically, I don't think we talked about this on the podcast yet, but we talked about, I don't think we talked about our first date. Did we ever talk about that?
I don't know. I don't think so.
First date, young and in love. Actually, we weren't in love yet. We didn't know that. You loved me. I didn't know. You had this weird infatuation.
Whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, so we were on our first date. You remember this, right?
I do remember.
Do you remember where we went?
Chili's.
We went to Chili's.
A celebration of food.
Is that what it was called?
Oh, no, that's cheese maybe.
I don't remember which
know.
one was which.
Have you ever seen the reel where they have like all the commercials? How it's like, I can't remember anything from school, but I can remember every single commercial jingle.
No, I don't. Yeah,
anyway,
probably
go
do.
ahead. It's
Chi-Chi.
probably Chi-Chi's,
Wow, I
the
can't believe you brought
celebration of
Chi-Chi's.
food.
Not even sure if there's one open ever. But okay, so Chili's. Do you remember the episode leading up to that?
The episode?
Well, the interaction. I don't know how to say that. What was the premise before we got to?
Oh, before we got to Chili's?
Yeah. What was the marker that I feel like?
Well, I don't think that was the first date, because the first date you did pick, I think. And maybe it was the next date. Are you talking about how you made me pick?
Well, yes. Okay, so let me explain this. I don't think Leanne is tracking with me here. I remember whether it was the first or second date. I don't know now.
Yeah,
Now
I think
you've
it was the
confused me.
second date.
Okay. In one of the dates, I sat in the car. Now, let me just explain, first of all, Leanne was extremely shy, very quiet.
Young.
Not
I was
young,
only 16.
16. Not nearly the kind of boisterous, outspoken
I'm not
woman that
that
she is
boisterous.
now. But she was very young, and she was, we were young. We were, first or second date. And I turned to her and I said, Leanne, where would you like to go to eat? And she said to me,
Wherever you would like to go.
yeah, I think it was, I don't know. and it was this ongoing. And finally I said, Leanne, I am not going to drive this car until you make a decision.
I still remember that moment. I still have anxiety thinking about that.
You have anxiety from that? I was trying to be a gentleman. Where
and
would you
I
like
was
to go?
overwhelmed by that. That's probably a whole nother episode about how, I didn't care where we went. I was happy to be with you. So I was legit letting you pick because it didn't matter.
But I knew.
But inside I was like, oh no.
Well,
what if I picked the wrong place?
No, because I knew in my life that I had to develop you into the outspoken leader that you are today.
You had no idea what was coming.
No idea. So I remember that moment, and the moment always kind of lives in my mind rent-free, because I think about it and I think how far Leanne has come. Now, Leanne is not nearly as quiet as she would have been at 16.
No.
She's very opinionated, much more opinionated than she was when she was 16.
True.
She lets me know how she feels without me asking, right?
Yes, you're going to know, but vice versa.
Right. But here's the thing. The reality is we came to this through our relationship. And our relationship, as many of you are listening would say, is there's ups and downs, there's valleys, there's mountaintop experiences. Now, hopefully you're listening to this and you're going, we have so many more mountaintops than we do valleys. But you can't have a mountain unless you have a valley. You have to have those moments where you go through hard times, and how you get through them, how you communicate,
process them.
how you process, all of those things is what develops your relationship.
Yeah. And I'll make note that if you are having arguments or conflict or any of those things in your marriage or relationships, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
Right.
Because
that's right.
Like you don't need a divorce or you got to go to counseling.
You had one fight.
Right. Like, or
your wife
even
didn't want to tell you
several,
what
you know, like it's just that there's a way, like you said, like thankfully I learned how to process through not being able to speak up for what I wanted.
Well,
and
yeah.
So there's like a process, like, so just let you know, like, so if in conflict, it's learning to work through it and not run from it.
Yeah. Well, I brought my fatigues, my pants and my hat, because we're talking about fighting. And here's what I want you to know. You said this, and this is true. Today, in this podcast, we want to differentiate between like normal relationship disagreements and unhealthy fighting patterns, right?
Correct.
There's a difference. And we want to be able to help you if you are in those moments where you feel like we are in an unhealthy state. What do we have to do? And for those of you that maybe are just going through relationships and you're like, yeah, we fight. We want to teach you ways to fight fair, because the reality is disagreements, they're going to happen in a relationship. Now, let me just say this. If you're listening to this and you're saying, well, me and my wife, we never fight. It's
amazing. They should be teaching this.
Well, yeah, but I always feel like that's not entirely true. Because if you're not disagreeing, someone is not sharing their opinion. There's no way.
It's hard to agree on every single thing with one person.
That's right. So I want to demystify the myth that if you are fighting, you are not in a healthy relationship. Yes. Again, we're using the word fight. We're not talking fist. We're not talking anger, bad words. We're not talking about belittling each other. We're going to talk through all those things. That's not the kind of fighting. Disagreements.
Yeah.
Maybe gets to an argument. Maybe you feel like I got to get away from her for a few minutes. Like those are things that happen in life.
They're natural.
So the question is fighting in marriage bad?
No, I think we just addressed it. It is. It's not. It's healthy.
Right. So disagreements are normal, but bitterness and hate is not. So that's where we want to differentiate that today. If you have bitterness in your heart towards your spouse, if you hate your spouse, that is a sign that something deep-rooted is wrong. The biblical perspective is conflict is inevitable, right? But how we handle it determines the health of our marriage. There are scriptures I want to give to you. Scripture, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Disagreements can actually refine us. Now, I can say with certainty that this woman right here on my right, your left, she has refined me. She has sharpened me. There's times where I know in my life I would not be the man, the leader, the dad, the person I am today if it wasn't for you challenging me, but also encouraging me, for you getting to the root of some things, say, well, what's really going on there? Those are the things that she can do so well and made me. You are a blessing. You are a blessing.
No, and I could say the same for you.
Oh, I hope you would. I was hoping you were going to say something.
A long way.
Yes, a mighty long way.
In my communication, like opening up on how I am feeling. But that's also another form of fighting, right? Because you're coming in with two different personalities and two different perspectives, and you don't always fight the same or argue the same or come into conflict the same way. So you have to decide that too. Learn that.
James has something in James 1.
What does James tell us?
James 1 verse 19 says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry.
That's a hard one.
That is a hard one.
Because a lot of us, what do they say?
What do they say?
A lot of people
yes.
aren't really listening. They're waiting to say what they want to say, right? I forget what the whole nice package phrase is, but that happens in marriage a lot. Like somebody's saying something, but you're not even listening. You're trying to, well, wait, so I have to say this and get my point across. So
most of the time in disputes that we have, not just in relationship with our spouse, but in others, many times we can zone out. So they're talking and all we're thinking about is our response.
Yes.
And so that's why James makes a point to say, be quick to listen and slow to speak. And I think we would avoid a lot of fights if we just did that.
It's true. It's so true.
Right? Because we respond in a situation. That's the problem. That's the main problem why we get in so many disagreements and fights in relationships, is because we respond. And sometimes it's done out of the heat of the moment, or somebody said something, it rubbed you the wrong way, or you may just be having a bad day and something triggers you, and you typically, unfortunately, I'd say this, is we become very vulnerable and take it out on our most loved ones.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I think we talked about it here before, was pride. We want to be right.
Yeah.
No matter what we're arguing about.
Right.
We don't want to humble ourselves. It's like, you want to get your point across to prove why I responded that way or why I reacted. And so that, what does the end of James say? Be humble. Does it say that?
And slow to become angry.
Yeah. So humility is part of that.
Yeah. I think many times we deal with a thing called pride. And pride can creep in and make a little disagreement, or even something that was said completely ambiguously. It had no root of trying to spark up a fight, but pride can be triggered by pride and blow something out of proportion. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you can just be like, I can't believe you said that to me, or I dare you talk to me like that, or do you know who I am, and all these things that pride masquerade as, and that's where a lot of fights originate.
Yes. Out of this, like I said, the need to be right, or the need to not want to humble yourself because you said something or did something that wasn't right.
Yeah.
But you're too proud to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah.
I said that. I didn't mean that.
Well, there's good news. Paul has a solution for that in Ephesians 4, writing to the church of Ephesus in verse 26. He says, don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Oh, now that one, I'm still working on.
You like to be angry and go to bed?
Well,
are you holding a root of bitterness towards me right now?
Mark is a verbal processor. I am an internal processor.
Internal.
So, and sometimes when you're
internal or eternal, which one? Is it eternal? Always?
Which one's better?
I'm just, what? That was a joke, by the way. I'm saying you're forever holding internally.
Okay.
You get it. Internally, internal.
I used to be like that, but I've gotten better. So when you internally process something,
yes,
it takes some time.
It does.
And so
I'm learning.
I'm not like wanting to rectify that right before I go to sleep. Right. And so I'm so frustrated.
Yeah, I think
the sun's going down. I'm angry.
And what Paul is saying is really about addressing it and not letting this thing linger.
Yes.
Right?
Not for days, for weeks, for months, because then that's when, if that's not fixed, that's when part of the not fighting fair comes in, because when you bring up past things, that is like a red flag for not fighting fair, Right. And there's so many things.
Right. And I think if you remember when Chris and John spoke a couple episodes about our friends in California, when they spoke about that there's times where they will table the discussion or the disagreement for the next day, because they know that at a certain place and time in their day, they're mentally exhausted, maybe physically exhausted, and they realize this is not going to get resolved.
Nothing good's going to happen right now.
Right. And I think that's important to take note of as well, that you have to understand the setting, that like you can't just go, well, I'm sorry, Leanne, I'm going to go to bed. And then you turn over and that's not really genuine remorse or, asking for forgiveness.
Right. Or working through the conflict. That's just kind of like, I
just don't want to deal with it anymore.
Exactly.
So let's just get it over with.
Exactly.
That it always reminds me of my kids. When one of my kids hits somebody or hurts somebody, I say, hold on a second, tell them you're sorry. And they sorry, like that, right? They go, sorry. Or
they say it so, they're
angry. Such an angry sorry. Sorry, yeah. Like one kid one time said sorry, and it was like you could tell it was like eating them up, and they were sorry, and they're crying, and I'm like, this is not remorse. This is not
it goes back to the pride. I don't want to apologize.
It's amazing how little they can be, and they do not want to say they're sorry.
Yep.
It is a root that has been placed in humanity, and we have to uproot it out of us.
Yeah.
So we have to avoid stonewalling. Do you know what that is?
I do, but I don't think I'm going to explain it properly.
It's shutting down emotionally. Like, it's like, I'm just going to shut down, and I'm just like, it's almost
like avoiding the circumstance.
Right, I'm just going to, whatever. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. I mean, Leanne's never done this before. Leanne, are you okay? Yep, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. Man, do you ever get that? Man, have you ever gotten this? Leanne, are we good? Yep, we're good. Yep, And I'm like, okay.
Part of that, good. I think, is very smart because Leanne is not saying something she'd regret later.
Oh,
so
you're
I'm
speaking
keeping
in third
my
person.
mouth shut.
That's not good. Yeah.
So that I don't regret my words.
But that is essentially sweeping it under the rug. You know that.
Yes, avoiding it because you don't want to deal with it, right? And which is a bad thing because, like I said, you're going to eventually have to deal with it. Whether it's in that moment, it's going to eventually come up if not dealt with.
That's
It'll
right.
come up in a different situation. So it's not like you're getting away from it, right?
Well, I always liken it to when we say sweeping it under the rug. If you sweep enough things under the rug, you will trip over it over time.
Exactly.
And I think many times we have to make sure that we really get to the root of the issue. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. Many times, I think you would agree, those of you listening or watching could say that a lot of times the fight itself, whatever spurred the fight on, is not really the root of it.
Right.
A lot of times it's deeper rooted. Like maybe I have issues with my trust towards you, or maybe I'm still kind of upset about something that happened a year ago, and that trigger. I always liken it to a cut or on your hand or a bruise, you know. Yeah. I remember at CrossFit, I would get those box jumps. I'm not good at box jumps. You know, you ever see a movie, White Man Can't Jump?
White Man Can't Jump.
I realized why, and I would hit the box, and I would, oh man, that hurts. Those box jumps when you
get you every time.
Get your shin. There's no muscle right here.
That's why you should just stay
it's just a
home.
bone. Anyway, the box jumps. I would hit the box, and that would be so sore.
It looked absolutely painful.
I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because I'm getting flashbacks. But anyway, the point of it is many times that is the root of our argument. There is a bruise. There's something that is under the skin, underneath our emotions, our person, who we are, that there's something going on there that we have not dealt with, and it's not healing correctly.
That's good.
So we got to make sure that we don't push that aside and just say, I'm just going to give the silent treatment. I'm going to walk away. No, there is a time where we have to get that healed. It's okay to cool down. Like, I think we got to remember there's probably people watching this that are passionate people. There's a lot to talk about this. I mean, just the passionate part of it can be an excuse in itself, right?
Yeah.
Like we could just say, well, you know, I'm a passionate Italian or I'm a passionate Puerto Rican. Hey, you know, it's just who we are. And that does not give you an excuse to have anger.
Yeah. Anger. Yeah. Okay. So I would ask you in this whole how to fight fair, what are two, rules, I guess, or things that you would say are like things that you're like, okay, we don't go there or we don't touch this.
Right.
Like when you argue.
Yeah. Well, number one, because we have done so much ministry in the inner healing realm, you have to be very careful the words you use. You cannot use cutting, bad, like words that would come against who you are.
Right.
Like that is off the table.
Well, what does scripture say? There's life and death are in the power of the tongue. And then it says too, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So when you say certain things, even though you're angry or heated in the moment, it's not always, it's forgivable, but not always forgettable. So if you might say to your spouse something that you're like, why did I say that? They still are remembering those words that came out of your mouth. And so it's just, that's a good one. Like, just remember the power of your words and what you speak and the passion of a moment.
And I'll give you an example. Like, sometimes you could be in a fight and it's easy to just say something like, I hate you. Like, that could just something, maybe that comes out of your mouth, or you could say something like, you know, I always regretted the day that I married you, whatever. And that is a powerful word.
Yes.
It's a powerful phrase to put out there. Now, you may be in the moment and you may say that, but you may think and go, I don't really mean that. But those words,
just the fact that you say it, just like when we, like, it's off limit, like We never say, I want a divorce or divorce. Like that never comes up in anything. Like you don't even let the word come out of your mouth, because why even put that on the table and let the enemy have a field day with the words that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even an option. Like even when we have disagreements, I'm not thinking I got to get out of this marriage. I mean, it's like there's nothing that we've gone through that we can't work through with Jesus, right? Sometimes you need Jesus, sometimes you need other help, but many times it's just literally it could be you're tired, I'm tired, we're frustrated, there's things going on at church, the kids are just going crazy. There's so many stimulus.
Yes.
And we end up fighting against the one that we are supposed to be in union with.
Your partner.
You asked me what two things were. And, the second thing I would say is I've learned to humble myself, that the Holy Spirit, he is so good at getting me back to where I need to be able to humble myself and say, I'm sorry. And I try to be quick to do that.
You are really good about that, I will say. Way better than I am. I hold it for a little while longer, let you suffer a little bit.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let me suffer a little bit?
Yeah, you don't deserve the apology.
Wow. And ladies and gentlemen, that right there is pride.
Yes, but it's
How do you deal with that? That's a good point. Let's talk about that. Because there's probably a lot of people listening that feel the same way. The only reason why, you think about that for a moment. I'll explain why I'm at where I'm at, because I genuinely want to please the Lord. Like I want to be in right standing with the Lord, and I want to be in right standing with you, right? And it's not because I have to like earn God's love, but I genuinely, like I feel the Holy Spirit when he'll tell me, okay, you're being a jerk. Okay, you need to chill out. Okay, you need a Snickers bar, whatever that is, and you need to get this thing right. And so I want to humble myself and be able to come to you and say, look, I'm sorry, Sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes, I'm like Drake. I'm in my feelings, man. Like, I'm like, hey, I want to be here. And I have to not have a pity party, because pity parties are the worst parties to ever go to, and they're party of one.
Pitiful.
Nobody comes to a pity party except for yourself,
Yeah.
So like, that's why I feel like it's important for me to come to you, and then go a step deeper. As the man of the home, as the man of the relationship, I have a responsibility to lead, and I should be the one leading with kindness, with forgiveness, with joy, with repentance. Like that should be the atmosphere that I set. And I've had to have these discussions with even my kids, where I've had to say, "Hey, I'm sorry, Dad messed up. He shouldn't have said that, or he shouldn't have responded there, or I'm sorry, whatever." And it's humbling, right?
Yeah.
So that's my piece of it. So now explain your heart a little bit of why you don't want to forgive people.
You're just way more spiritual than I am.
Oh, well, okay. I do know a church you can go to.
I think for me, I'm so I go inward.
Okay. Yeah.
And so there's so much in there that I can't process it all or get it all out or figure out how I'm actually feeling.
Yeah.
Because I know that my feelings, they can deceive me, right? So I can feel one way, but that's not actually the truth of how you may feel, even though I feel that. So I'm trying to process all that all at once. So it's so hard. That takes me a little bit. So for me to come and say, I'm sorry, I'm still figuring out, what am I sorry about? I want to be sorry. I know we fought, but what am I apologizing for?
Right.
So it just takes me a little bit longer to chill, bring my thoughts together, let Jesus come in. Because even Jesus, I don't want to come in sometimes. I'm like, listen,
you don't
God,
even want Jesus to
not
come
right
over.
away. I'm like, let me deal with it. I'll welcome Jesus in when the time is right.
So would you say me and Jesus are hanging out over
that's
here?
That's what I said. You're more spiritual than I am.
Jesus are just chilling. I'm like, Jesus, I don't know, man. This is your woman you made.
Jesus is like, Leanne, just let me in you. This will be easier. And I'm like, let me work it out. God, I'll work it out.
I will say, Leanne, you did say something that's interesting. And, I think it's a valid point. Verbal processors, as opposed to, what would you call me? I'm a verbal processor as opposed to an internal
processor.
Okay. Yeah. So sometimes for us, as we talk it out, it gets resolved. But for you, you have to think it out. You have to literally mull over scenarios.
Yes.
I don't know what that world looks like.
Right, because I don't really sometimes even, I have all these feelings and emotions that I don't even know how to articulate. So it's all in my head and all. And so I'm, I guess, mature enough to know, don't put all that out.
I got you.
And then start shooting things and saying things that you'd regret or you don't really mean. So try to like keep it all in and try to figure out, okay, that's how you feel. That's not what he meant. That's really the truth. That's a lot, and try to get it all, I guess, categorized and then come and say, okay, this is why I was angry.
Yeah.
This is why I'm feeling this way. And then I can.
Would you liken it to like the Dewey Decimal System in a library? How are you categorizing this? I'm fascinated. I'll be honest with you.
Actually,
I feel like I'm learning in real time right now.
In real time with myself.
You are. I feel like we're having a session and we're inviting people into it right now because
this makes so much sense.
Does it make sense now? I'm learning, Leanne, right now here in real time.
I'm learning myself. See what I mean?
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
I just was processing it, and
Welcome
now
to
it
10
came
and 2.
out, and now I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Wow. I hope more people feel this way. And I'm not the only one.
I know they do. I know they do. I always feel like as a verbal processor, someone who kind of works things out verbally, and I see things, I'm like, I can see it. I'm talking about it. I feel like I'm always the oddball. I think there's a lot of people that really internally process things. And I think what happens sometimes is you can kind of get lost in that world.
Right.
It's like all of a sudden you're on level, I don't know, whatever level of inception now. You're in this deep level, and now you don't even remember what you were fighting about. What's your name? How do you get out of that?
And that's the case. And what happened to us in the beginning of our marriage was that we would have these, disagreements, and I would go verbal process it, and I would just do that, and then I'd be done and over it. And he's waiting for me to come back and discuss. And it's like, hello, what happened?
You said verbal process.
Internal process.
Right.
It. So I'm like, what? I'm over it. What? I'm done.
Yes.
And he's like, what just happened? What happened? I'm like, oh, I'm over it.
This was groundbreaking what you're explaining, because maybe other people are doing this as well. And if this is you, I'd love if you're listening to this, maybe you could put on their verbal processor or any of those
internal
things. Internal processor.
Hopefully there's more of them, because wow, I sound a little crazy.
I don't know if you sound crazy, but here's the thing. Like when I think about that, when you told me that there are times where you will literally process something and then be over it, and then I'm like, but you didn't tell me anything. I found like, oh, okay, this is part of communication. Like, we have to talk this out. So even though I have to meet you in that place of giving you time, and you have to meet me in that place of communicating it together.
And that was part of my also dealing with, I don't like conflict. I don't like to come into conflict. I want to avoid conflict at all costs. Yeah. So that was me internal processing it without you, so we didn't have to have conflict. And so when I came back to you, all is well. There wasn't a bomb that went off. I fixed it, and now we've become happy friends again.
That's good.
But I had to learn, but that wasn't healthy either. I did have to learn how to healthy conflict resolution, how to come and say how I really feel, and how to stand up for myself and say all those things without feeling like intimidated by like a stronger person, right? If you were more outspoken, that was like, how do you even know how to put all your thoughts and your words together? Yeah. I'm still thinking, my words are still going crazy. So, but I've learned along the way, and I've learned how to 10 children will help you with that too.
I will. You will become a verbal processor with 10 kids. Okay, so this is really good stuff. I hope it's helping people too. Yeah. So let me ask you this. When do you get to, how do you know, maybe let me say it this way. How do you know that this is bigger than what you and your spouse can do? Like, you got to seek help. How do you know that? What are some of the signs there?
I think a good sign, because I was going to say one of the things, one of the rules, I guess, what you shouldn't do for healthy conflict or fighting, how to fight fair, is never bring up past things, right? Like, so once it's forgiven, you can't bring it back into the fight, right? Because that's not fair. That's off limits. That was done. But when you keep bringing things back in, I feel like that's kind of like a red flag. Like, why do you keep bringing up
There's a deeper root.
that thing that happened again? Like, so obviously you're not over that, or you haven't forgiven that. So I think that can be a red flag of like, that needs to be counseling, healed.
Right.
I also think if there's a history of physical abuse, verbal abuse, those kind of things, that can kind of morph over into an unhealthy kind of conflict in a relationship or in a marriage that needs to be addressed so that it's not going to other levels that shouldn't be, right?
I mean, we'll make this statement: in no way, shape, or form is fighting fair ever involving mental, physical, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, any of that stuff. That stuff should, if that's in that place, you absolutely need to get help right away. But here's the deal. Many times, when we get to a place where we feel stuck, right, where we feel like I can't get this thing situated. You're
coming up against the same issue.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
And well, I'm just saying, like, we can't resolve these issues. Like, we just, there's just one thing after another. I think what I want you to know is that it's okay to get help.
Absolutely.
It's okay to go find a couple. We've said this before on this podcast. Find somebody that's been married longer than you.
Yes.
And that you trust and sit down with them, because
there's so much wisdom in that.
Well,
and even in professional counselors, wisdom in people that have went for training on how to do conflict resolution. So.
Yeah, well, we got scripture for it. Matthew 18, Jesus said this: seek wise, godly counsel if needed. Matthew 18, 15, verse 16. Proverbs 15, verse 22. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. See, not every issue that we have, you need a counselor. Like, I don't want you to think like, oh my gosh, we had a fight, let's call up a counselor. No, you don't need to. But mentorship from a strong, godly couple can make a huge difference.
Huge. I mean, wisdom from the elders in not just this, in any situation. I feel like people that have gone down a road in any area that have wisdom, go for it.
Well,
seek counsel.
And let me say this too, one of the advantages we have, and I know this is not everybody's story, is we come from two families that never got divorced. Your mother and father are still married today after many years. My mom went to be with the Lord. They were married through thick and thin. So we had those models,
Right. But we've also learned from those models that it wasn't all perfect.
Right.
Along the way, they were very open. Like it's not like they had these perfect relationships. They had to work through their conflicts, their issues, their arguments, learning how to fight fair, learning to be humble and sacrifice. So it can be done. That's what it encouraged us, that it can be done.
That's right. So I'm going to give you some red flags that your marriage needs help before it's too late. If you're listening to this and any of these flags kind of pop up and you go, man, that's us. That's why we do this. That's why we have this podcast. We want to help you. Number one, identify that you may be going down a road that you shouldn't be going down. You need help. It's a little red flag. Maybe it's a orange flag, I'll say. Just a warning, a yellow or whatever. But also to let you know that you're not alone. People are going through these, and there's a lot of people that have gotten help and have a very healthy and vibrant marriage. Yep. So number one, red flags that your conflict resolution is unhealthy. You're not fighting fair. Number one, you spend more time in separate rooms than together.
That's good, because that means you're avoiding each other.
Right. And you feel okay with that. You don't miss the other person. Yeah. Something's wrong there. Lack of intimacy. I mean, we've just got done a couple episodes of intimacy, how important it is, but it is a sign of a healthy marriage. In fact, the Bible talks about it in a way that it's the outflowing of our love for each other, that we're intimate with each other. So if you say to me, hey, we've not been intimate in months, there's a flag. Why is that? What's happening? What is taking the place of that? That is a red flag, or maybe a yellow flag. Frequent silent treatments instead of open communication. I just rather not talk to them.
Yeah. Avoiding issues.
Yeah. One or both partners always feeling unheard or unimportant. And that's the thing that I think is important. Sometimes people think, well, we never get in a fight, but is there one of the people in the relationship that just feels unheard or unimportant and they just shut down? That's not healthy.
Good. I will say and I know this can go on the male side too, but like for instance, in our situation, like I could have easily fallen into the unheard, unnoticed category if I would have stayed and not grown in who I was. And so I will say, like, be mindful of maybe maturing in who you are to speak up for yourself. If you know you're the person that your spouse is coming in and they're more verbal, they're more dominant, they're more outspoken, they might say they know how to communicate, and you've just learned, you just learned how to be quiet and submissive and just like, whatever, I'm not gonna rock the boat, maybe encourage or challenge you, like, no, speak up. Do the hard thing of confronting, and then hopefully your spouse will be well receiving when you come to them.
Well, that's another one. Avoidance of tough conversations because they always escalate.
Yeah.
If you feel like, I don't want to bring it up, he's going to get mad. I don't want to say this, she's going to get upset. If that is the lingering background of your relationship, that's a warning sign. That's a check engine light.
Right.
Like, just make sure to get that dealt with because that is under the rug.
Right.
It'll get too big. You'll trip over it. Last one, feeling more like roommates than a couple. I remember years ago talking to someone, and they had mentioned that, we're kind of just coexisting, cohabitating, for the kids, right? Like, once the kids get out of high school, well, then we can. And I think, what a miserable marriage.
It's not really a marriage. If you're just coexisting, right?
Coexisting. Just keeping the peace till we get out of here. It's like doing time until I get let out of prison for good behavior. Feeling more like roommates than a couple. The Lord wants you to rekindle that first love again.
You know what I saw the other day? A reel, and I forget. It's the guy, I think he works for Ramsey. Could be related to him for all I know, but he was talking about how they were talking about how 85%, I think it's 85. I always get these stats wrong. I mean, don't.
You're supposed to do your research. That's why I got a computer
sometimes
here.
I just, I know.
Just make up a random stat. They're not important stats. What are they, percentages?
It was like 85% of affairs happen at the workplace.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, why is that? Yes. Why is that? And they were just saying how, because couples, they get married, they get into the routine, and then it becomes more like duties. Like, okay, you're doing that, right. You're just checking things off the list. You're just going through the day to day.
Like
it becomes
roommates.
Like the roommate thing. Like, it's just like these obligations.
Yeah, you take out the trash, you cook, you do this.
Yeah, you take the kids here, I'll do this, we'll meet, Whereas in the workplace, you are working towards something together, towards a goal. And so you're working and then you're accomplishing something. You're excited. They're excited. And so you're feeding off each other. And so they were saying how you need to get your marriage, to a place where you're still having goals together, dreams together, accomplishing things together. Yeah. And so that you still have that, like, you're feeling good. Like, we did this together. We're accomplishing, we're moving forward. And that builds that thing where you're not feeling like roommates anymore.
That's right. Yeah, the devil will always tempt you with things that you feel you don't have. So if he can say you don't have the dreams and the passions with your wife like you do this woman at work. I mean, you guys are like, every time you talk, she's like, yeah, I'm with you. But when you talk to your wife, it's like those little things,
right.
You may not even be attracted to that woman at work.
Right.
But all of a sudden now you start second guessing your wife. Why isn't she as passionate about life like I am? It's so important to work on these things. And that's why we want to address these because, Colossians 3 says this, bear with each other and forgive one another. And over all these virtues, put on love. Out of all of these things, make sure you put on love. And sometimes you have to think of love like a jacket. You got to put it on.
I was going to say, if they say put on love, that means it can come off. Right?
Whoa, come on now.
That means love can fall off, love can come off.
That's right.
So you have to put it on.
Yeah,
so it's an action.
That's right. In Ecclesiastes 4, 2 are better than 1, If either of them fail, one can help the other up. That's why this is so key. You know, there's no way I could do any of the things I'm doing today if it wasn't for you. And the interesting thing about it is I can only go as far as we are able to go together.
Right.
Right. And you may be listening to this and thinking, well, that's not really true. You know, I got all this stuff and my wife has got all this stuff. But I promise you this, when you get on the same page, you'll run further and be more healthy than you were if you were running alone and trying to do your own thing. I think it's very dangerous. I'll add another flag here, is when people have their own lives. Like two separate lives, like two ships in the night. It's like I got my girlfriends over here and I got my hobbies over here, and I got my bros over here, my homies over here, and my hobbies over here, and we don't intersect. I think that's a very dangerous place. I'm not against having hobbies. I'm not against you having friends. This is all healthy parts of relationship. But if that's what you look forward to, as opposed to saying, I love being with my spouse, that's a flag, man. You just got to get to the root of that, or else that will build up over time. And next thing you know, you'll be very rarely spending time together at all.
Roommates.
Now, I'm going to reference an article from All Pro Dad. I've done that before. It's a great publication. You could do that online, allprodad.com, I think it is. And it's for dads, and it usually has these guys. Some of them are coaches, like NFL coaches, and
nice.
giving words of wisdom to the men. But they mentioned 4 ways to practically walk out fighting fair. 4 ways. Number 1, stick to the issues at hand. And you mentioned this. Okay. Don't bring up the past stuff.
Right.
You know, if you're dealing with an issue, don't dig deep and go, well, let me tell you about a fight we had. No. Yeah. Just stick to the issue at hand. Number 1, fighting fair. Number 2, watch your tone and words. Speak with grace and truth.
That goes back to humility.
That's right. That's right. If you have to take a moment before you talk about it with your spouse to collect yourself, to communicate properly, you need to do that. Yeah. Nobody wants to be talked down to.
Right. So absolutely. That just makes it worse.
Oh, I know. Like, and if you ever been like in a disagreement with your kids, and they start, puffing up their chest, like what? Like some of our older kids, they'll start going, well, and I'm like, oh, now you want to peacock now? Come on now, I got bigger feathers than you, like we're strutting around, like, and I'm like, no, that doesn't get anywhere. It just, especially if the pride is there, right?
It just causes more conflict, more things to address.
That's
actually.
Right. So watch your tone and words. Number 3, take breaks when needed, but always come back. Like even if we have to say, look, we're going to have to table this discussion. I have to go to work, or I'm going to table this discussion. You got to do this, whatever that is. But we need to talk about that and make time to talk about it. The enemy wants nothing more than you to sweep it under the rug, forget about it, or I don't want to deal with it. Because I know that sometimes, I know you've mentioned that before. Sometimes it's like, I want to avoid conflict.
Yes.
Where I'm a checklist guy and I'm like, I just want to get it over with so I can check it off the list. Both of them really have their own pitfalls.
Right.
Because the checklist guy can just go through the motions and say, well, I'm just here to get this thing dealt with so I can move on. And you're going and you're, talk about what your pitfall could be.
Well, just like I said, like avoiding the conflict and just kind of like, whatever. I've moved on, and really you haven't moved on because you haven't discussed it. So
yeah, you just avoid it. Take breaks when needed. And number 4, listen to understand, not to respond. We were talking about this already.
Yeah.
Ask clarifying questions before assuming. One of the things I'm learning in leadership and communication is the art of repeating things. Where you say, so let me get this correct.
Yes. So what I'm hearing you say.
That's right. You said this. And that is the perfect opportunity for you to go, well, hold on a second. That's not what I said, but that's what I heard.
Exactly.
Right?
That's a good one because that happens so many times.
So many times.
Where it's like they say something, but you heard something completely different. Yeah. So that is a good habit or a practice to get into. So what you're saying is, and then they have the opportunity to be like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Or no, that is not what I said.
or we've had this. Yes, I said that, but actually that's not what I meant.
Yes.
Like I'm going to go back on it. I said that, and that's really, now that I hear you say it, that's not really what I meant. I meant to say this. Whatever that is, that's your moment to communicate effectively. And that is the time where I can then go, okay, so you said this, so here's what I'm going to do. Like even the follow-up, understanding, because it's one thing to just say a bunch of words, all you verbal processors, just say a bunch of words and think somehow we've worked it all out. And one of the things I know is verbal processors can also be good. It's like shock and awe. I use all these big words and I confuse my enemy, and then I get out of, I'm out of this thing. And like, that's not what we're here to do. It's not just so we can talk, it's to understand.
And I will say that, back to what we were saying about when people say something and it's like, well, that's might not be what you said, but that's how I felt.
That's how I felt.
So
right.
You have to own that,
yes.
Even though that's not how you meant to say it or what that was coming from, it's still how that person felt. So an apology and being humble is in order in those situations. Like, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way because that wasn't my intention. Because I think a lot of people think, well, that's not what I meant. It's like, whatever, that's your problem. That's not what I meant. But it's like, well, you might not have meant that, but that's how it felt to that person. And you always have to legitimize, in a sense, how a person feels when you speak to them or react to them, where you might, because we all react and feel in different ways. That's so something that you might say to me might rub me the wrong way, where if I said it to you, you'd be fine, That's so you just have to just be mindful of that how you respond, your tones, the way you say something, and then you care enough about this person that you want to be, even with your children, like, I'm sorry, that's not how I meant it.
Yeah.
Right. This is what I meant.
Yeah. No, you've taught me that. That's for sure. I know I've said things and you'd be like, you feel a certain way. And I'm like, well, why do you feel that way? Because, the way you interpret that. And the good news is the longer you're with someone, the more you get to know them,
Yes.
And so I want to end on some good parts here, because we've talked about all the negative things, how to identify, even how to fight fair. But the reality is, in a healthy marriage, these come up less and less. I feel like the more you get to know someone and the more you fall in love with them and the more you care for them and prefer them over yourself. It's like I have to put your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, who you are, care for you. The more that I start to understand the little intricacies of who you are, how you communicate, body language, things you do as opposed to say, and even be able to honor that moment where you say, I just need some time to process this, right? But I find, like, in our relationship, and maybe you could speak into this too, it's like, I feel like now, there may be a few little, like, disagreements, like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. Okay, well, you're wrong, whatever, but I don't feel like we fight much as maybe we did early on in our marriage. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I don't think we have fought very much in our marriage. In my opinion, I don't think neither one of us we could be passionate, but I don't think either one of us are fighting. I don't think either one of us wants to get our point across that badly that way it brings us. So I think we've avoided probably a lot more than most people that if you do want to get your point across. And I think we cared more about making sure we were okay with each other than being right, I think. So I think it's been good in that sense.
Yeah, I would say this, your relationship with the Lord, your personal relationship, has to be more important than your relationship with your spouse. And if you'll go to the Lord first and work on your relationship with Jesus, you will be a better helpmate to your spouse, right? And so a lot of times we think, well, if I just do everything she wants me to do, then we won't fight, right? Or maybe you say, if I just, if I take care of all the responsibilities he wants me to, then he won't fight with me. And really, again, you're not living in a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is that your needs are met, you're being cared for, you're being heard, and that you're together in that, like two becoming one. That means your emotions, the things that you feel, they feel to a certain extent, right? And so like I can tell when you're going through something, and I ask the Holy Spirit, Lord, give me words to speak. Or even like when I just feel off, like I just feel like, oh, I don't know, something about Leanne today, she's rubbing me the wrong way.
Impossible.
It's impossible. It's very very infrequent.
Few and far between.
Very, very few and far between. But when that does happen, I immediately go to Lord, what is up with me? Why do I feel so aggravated? I've started noticing a lot of times where I can let external circumstances like pressures at church or pressures in life or financial any of those pressures, right? Those big pressures, how they can sometimes cause me to be on edge, and then I can be snippy with you. And I realize the Lord's like, hold on, Mark, relax. This has nothing to do with Leanne. It's really, you just got to calm down and you got to give your cares to me, because scripture says, because I careth much. Like Jesus cares for the things we care for. And
or
sometimes
just take that moment to just take a break, because that could be like on me too. Like I'm overwhelmed. The kids have been crazy. The house is a mess. I have somewhere to be. It's just chaotic. And it's like, what's for dinner?
Right.
And so, but it's like just taking that moment, like, okay, let me backtrack, let me breathe, let me have a moment, let me get perspective again, and then jump back in and be like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm back, Back.
There's so many things to talk about on this topic. Like there's so many more layers to this. I'm just thinking we may have just kind of dusted up the first layer.
That's why we have multiple podcasts.
We have other episodes. And so here's what I want to do. If you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, write in the comments some of the things that maybe you still have questions about. Like, well, what about this or what about that? Or maybe you have, some ways that you've resolved conflict in your marriage. We'd love to hear about them. Like, what are those things that maybe you feel like works for you? Some people say, well, I do this. I go to the gym and I just get all this nervous energy out. I go run around the outside. There's little techniques that you do that maybe we can pass on to others. But know this, that whatever you're going through, disagreements will come, right? Because we're two human people with our own personalities and quirks and makeup.
Our own needs, our own wants.
That's right. But Jesus comes together. And I love what he makes this analogy. A 3-strand cord is not easily broken, right? And so when I officiate, and you've been part of some of these where we officiate a marriage, we'll often kind of quote that scripture, right? And because we're saying is you have a husband, you have a wife, and then you have Jesus, you have God woven together, and that's what knits them strong. And I believe in all my heart that when Jesus is part of your relationship, a lot of these things will get healed through the power of the Holy Spirit. Right. But let me just say this again, if you're watching this or listening to this and you need help, some of this stuff's kind of brought some things to the surface, find someone you can talk to. Get help. Your marriage is worth it, and you're worth it.
That's good.
Sound good?
I love it.
All right, it's 10 and 2 time. So 2 things, 10 seconds.
10 and 2. I would say don't bring up past
That's good.
things when you're trying to fight fair, and learn to forgive.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've learned, and we even talked about it today, is that everybody processes things differently. And so you can't just expect your spouse to respond the same way you respond. And then the other one is, be quick to listen and slow to speak. And I think we can avoid a lot of issues if we would just do that.
Sure we can.
Does that sound right?
Sounds good.
Are we still friends?
We're good.
All right, so these are fist bumps, not fists in anger.
We're not fighting.
They're fist in love.